Tonight's program, we're going to do a disclaimer, but this disclaimer is going to be a little bit different than the disclaimers we've had previously, slightly different. So I'm going to walk through this a little bit here, in the sense that obviously this will be a reminder that this episode will address various topics related to physical health, and also a reminder about multiple sclerosis. These may be sensitive to some of our viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The difference is tonight we're going to talk about vaccination, and we're going to talk about what has been bewildering us for the last 20 to 24 months in that of the pandemic. I understand for some this will be a very sensitive topic, but because of things that we have discussed on this show before, I had to accelerate this topic to tonight versus next week or even later in the season. So I appreciate your indulgence in tonight's episode because this is a very important topic. That said, we remind you to please consult your doctor, your mental health professional, your outreach group, your sponsor, or specialist before adopting any change to your dietary, physical, and or mental health regime. This first disclaimer is a new one. COVID-19 vaccines are free and available to anyone who wants one, as well as boosters. Vaccines.gov works with partners such as clinics, pharmacies, and health departments to provide accurate and up-to-date information about vaccination services in your area. You can also call 1-800-232-0233. Again, 1-800-232-0233. Vaccines.gov is brought to you by the United States Department of Health and Human Services, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and Vaccine Finder from Boston Children's Hospital. And then I would also talk about something that is very much a very important thing in this, in that if you're looking for options with respect to mental health, contact SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, at 1-800-662-HELP. That's 1-800-662-4357. The service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. A confidential, free information service for individuals and family members facing such stressors. It looks like I'm frozen. I'll get that off the screen and let me try. Okay, that's better. Okay, a little bit of a technical difficulty. SAMHSA, 1-800-662-4357. And then also, I'd be remiss not to talk about multiple sclerosis in that of the work of the National MS Society. The National MS Society is a collective of passionate individuals who want to do something about MS now, to move together towards a world free of multiple sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis is comprised of unpredictable and often disabling flare-ups of the central nervous system. Such flare-ups disrupt the flow of information within the brain and between the brain and the body. The National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS researchers in the world, investing more than $1 billion to date. MS stops people from moving, but the National MS Society exists to make sure that MS doesn't. To contact the National MS Society, please call 1-800-344-4867. Once again, 1-800-344-4867. Or go to their website at nationalmssociety.org. Thank you to all of you who have donated money to this amazing organization, or even those that went to the National MS Society to learn more about multiple sclerosis and demyelination. It touches me in so many ways, and over the 1 million people in this country that have multiple sclerosis. I appreciate all of you. And on that, let's begin. Tonight, we're going to discuss something that we haven't discussed verbatimly by its name since the show started. Mainly because for some period of time, we weren't allowed to specifically say COVID. But tonight, we're talking about COVID. Moreover, we're talking about COVID and how it relates to obesity. It's going to be a tough conversation, but we'll get through it. Because this is the venture forward. Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to the Venture Forward. I am John Venturini, a recovering addict of obesity, alcoholism, and compulsive gambling, and it is an honor and pleasure to see all of you tonight on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. This is a tough one because there has been so many thoughts with respect to what we've been dealing with for the last 2 years. Right around this time, back in 2019, it started rolling down the hill, didn't it? And it really became something where we really got encapsulated in all of this, in what ended up becoming from a small little blip to an epidemic to what we now know as a pandemic. If you think about the last 2 years and you think about how we've changed our lives, we changed the way we work, we changed the way we do everything. This has become part of our lives. That would be the understatement of the hour, wouldn't it? But this has absolutely become something where we know people who have been affected by it. And the way the numbers are going these days, it will affect a lot of people. And the best we can do is use common sense. The best we can do is try to live the most healthiest life we can. The last time we talked about this on the outskirts, without being cute and saying the Backstreet Boys reunion tour, instead of saying what it is, COVID-19, I was dealing with someone who was a dear viewer of this show who passed away from it. And the more we talk, the more I realize that all of you out in the audience, all of those that watch this on replay or whoever, will have either known someone who has been infected by it or has unfortunately and most tragically lost their lives from it. That's why this episode is really important. That's why I was tongue-tied in that disclaimer. That's why my laptop was tongue-tied in trying to have me present that disclaimer. But again, progress, not perfection. That said, let me say hello to all of you on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch real quick before we get started. And we got Matt over on YouTube who says hello. Hello, Matt. Hope you're doing well. Also on YouTube, we have Michelle. Hello. How are you? She sends 3 hearts. 3 hearts right back at you. And she says, this show is for me. I just wanted to take out to combat a crappy mode. Well, I'm glad you're here, as well as everyone else who is joining me tonight. If we think about the story of what this show is and the addictions and things I battled, first, foremost, and paramount is obesity. And if that isn't any reason for me to go down this road, I don't know what is. So we're going to talk about that. We're not going to go into specific lengths about my story because we've talked about that before. And at some point, we'll talk about my story again. But tonight, this is about everybody. This is about humanity. And moreover, a segment of humanity that is dealing with obesity and other risk factors against this pandemic. So let's get started. We talk about this as obesity and the pandemic, but if you think about it, it's obesity and all the other risk factors that the pandemic upholds that has accelerated sort of risk against. So we could talk about obesity, and I know about that story backwards, forwards, and sideways, but this is basically about all the risk factors, and we'll go through what each of those risk factors are in a minute or two. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the pandemic and the new normal, as I kind of alluded to in the intro. We're going to talk about the risk factors for COVID-19. We're going to talk about what obesity actually is, We're also going to talk about other things you can do in either prevention or if you do get infected, things that you can do to work through it. Because there's a lot of great advice out there. And we'll work through all of those. And during all of this, I will take your questions and comments. December 12th, 2019. A cluster of patients in Wuhan experienced shortness of breath. And that's when the ball started rolling. Through increased exposure and death and infection, we get to March of 2020 when we start talking about trials of vaccines, the Moderna vaccine, namely, on March 17th of 2020. We then get a vaccine for Pfizer. We get a vaccine for Johnson & Johnson. When we get to April of 2020, we talk about most U.S. states reporting widespread cases of COVID-19. When we get to May, the United States death toll surpasses 100,000. We get to September, it surpasses 200,000. And as we're going to talk about in a little bit, that number is past 800,000 now. It's still going. And we're vaccinating and we're boosting, but it's still going. So we must remain vigilant. What do those numbers look like? In the United States, there were 51,110,000 cases as of December 20th. 1.4 million tests over a 14-day sort of change there. They don't take a full number of the number of tests. There are plenty of tests, but 1.4 million in a 14-day sort of window. In that 14-day window, there are 68,970 hospitalized. That number is certainly growing day over day. And as far as the number of deaths by day, 1,299, giving the total at 806,335 in the United States. When we go worldwide and we go global, the number of cases is 276,500,000. The number recovered, 247 million, almost 248 million, and the number who have died is 5.38, almost 5.4 million from the pandemic. These numbers were furnished by the New York Times, those are the numbers on the left, and also Worldometers Info, which basically takes the information from a lot of different sources and puts it together. And I could definitely provide those sources in specific in the show notes after this program. So we go from 1 million, 2 million to 800, 100,000, 200,000 to 800,000. It's scary to even think about, scary to even talk about. What are the risk factors? We have an idea of what the risk factors are. These are things we've talked about or heard about before in the news, and things that we've even talked about in conversations. Older age, young problems, asthma, lung problems and asthma, older age, heart disease, nervous system conditions, diabetes and obesity, which we'll talk about a lot tonight, cancer and rare blood disorders, weakened immune system, chronic kidney and liver disease, mental health conditions, Down syndrome. This was furnished by the Mayo Clinic. The one that gravitates to me is the diabetes and obesity. Obesity is something I've been dealing with most of my life. I'm going to cut to Maine for a second. I've lived a very obese life. Well into my teenage years, well into my young adult years, well into my adult years. Diabetes, fortunately, knock on wood, hasn't been a problem in my life, but it does run in the family. So, of course, there's a lineage to that. So it's concerning, to say the least. Anyhow, I think about this, and I think about where we stand in the country as far as obesity rates. The rates of those that are either type 1 diabetic or type 2 diabetic. And those numbers are astronomical. So when we think about what obesity and diabetes means to the pandemic, this is much something that is very front of mind for a lot of folks. You go to see your PCP or your doctor. It's certainly something that is front of mind for them too. Speaking of, using a site called Bridge, is a site for Michigan. It's a Michigan news site, bridgemi.com. Michigan's battling obesity, the top risk factor of COVID-19. If you look at that map on the right-hand side, you can see that there are a lot of areas of dark red in that map. Dark red in that map of this country represents an obesity rate of more than 35% of its population. Orange being 30 to 35%, yellow being 25 to 30%, and green, as very rare that is less than 25%. What they're finding is that obese people are basically comprising more than half of all the COVID hospitalizations. That's based on the reporting that Bridge did, based on other sources of the CDC, NIH, etc. So, given that obesity is already a problem with our society, I'm going to cut to Maine for a second, it would stand to reason that there would probably be a good amount of obese people who are dealing with COVID outside of those other risk factors that I mentioned before, whether it is age or blood disorder or mental health, which is something that is part and parcel with me with the MS diagnosis. These are things that we have to be cognizant of. So, needless to say, when we see a map that looks like this, it doesn't surprise me, but it's also very much a real thing. A couple comments before we continue. Austin says, hey, how you doing, Austin? Hope you're doing well. Laura says, hi, JV and all. And then Michelle says, please keep my mom Shirley in prayer. She's in the hospital with end-stage lung cancer, pneumonia, and now COVID, picked up in the hospital. Won't be able to see her for her birthday on Thursday and Christmas. Michelle, my thoughts and prayers are with you. My thoughts and prayers are with your family. It's something that a lot of families are dealing with right now, where they have either someone who is in the hospital that has COVID or has other factors. And there's that separation again, because we have to stay protective of hospital wards and ERs and whatnot. Michelle, I'm thinking of you, and you are in my thoughts and prayers. So, obesity is definitely part of the story. Obesity, given the fact that it is a major sort of health factor in this country, and then you have something like the pandemic, they're going to go intertwine with each other. And that map is proof positive of that. Then the New York Times, about 2 weeks ago, puts out a story that is called "The Coronavirus Attacks Fat Tissue, Scientists Find." And it is a very interesting story. The link to the story is down on the bottom. There. One day I'll learn how to point correctly on this. But it is, there's some points of this that have become common knowledge over time, and as far as inflammation. But it's very interesting to see the two doctors from Stanford and the one doctor from Yale. The two doctors from Stanford, Dr. Blish and Dr. McLaughlin, from Yale, Dr. Dixit, basically working through all of this and coming up with the causation that inflammation accelerates risk as far as what the coronavirus does when we unfortunately get it and what it may do to us. And we talk about normal state, mild state versus deep state, severe state. It goes on to say that researchers have found that the coronavirus infects both fat cells and certain immune cells within body fat, basically prompting a damaging defensive response in the body. as well it would, because the body would quick to go against any sort of invader from an immune response, and that would be the first thing that comes to mind. Body fat, if we think about the extra fat, whether visceral or whatnot, can promote a state of nagging low-grade inflammation even when there is no infection. So if you think about those that are dealing with that sort of thing, I know for years with obesity, I know I've had inflammation in various parts. It could be something as subtle as gout, but it could be other things as well, things that we may not even know about. Inflammation is very much a real deal. That's why you get advice from either your doctor or holistic medicine doctor that says, well, you should start taking turmeric or other things that may be anti-inflammatories to help augment your diet. There's a lot of proof positive in that. One of the things that have helped me in the last 2.5, 3 years, turmeric and other anti-inflammatories. So this story that came out doesn't surprise me in the least. Dr. Blish goes on to say that body fat may even contribute to long COVID, severe COVID, a condition describing troublesome symptoms like fatigue that persists for weeks or months after recovery from an acute episode. And the numbers of long COVID is growing as well. So it goes back to a question about overall health. I'm going to go back to Maine for a second. If we think about how we take care of ourselves from a biobehavioral standpoint, we have to do what is right for us to make sure we're living the best life possible. That talks about our diet, that talks about our mentality, that talks about a lot of things. So in order to get there, we have to get our diet straight first and foremost, outside of what is going on up here too. Couple of comments. Easy says, hey, hello, JV, how are you, mate? And then Easy also says, hoping Blish part is only a theory. Well, part of it is a theory, but, it's basically the work of other doctors that have had consummate sort of research, consummate sort of deductions as well. So Blish is only one of many doctors that are going down that road, Easy. If we talk about what this means from the grand scheme of things, it could be the Achilles heel that the virus utilizes to evade our protective immune responses. If you think about what COVID does, it does affect our immunity right out of the get-go. That's why the vaccinations and the boosters have become very much an important thing. And one thing I'll say is, if you talk about people that are immunocompromised, we go back to the list of risk factors from before. That's certainly part of that list. The immunocompromised definitely have a major risk factor against COVID. So that stands to reason. Now, if you live a lifestyle that is more natural, that is more holistic in nature, there is a chance that you're not dealing with that sort of thing. But again, that's all conjecture because I'm not going to tell you what works for you. I'm not a doctor or a therapist. The best person you could talk to is your doctor, as I say in every disclaimer on this show. But that said, I'm going based off of what I know. And when I've started cleaning some things up, my life has changed dramatically. It has helped me in nearly the last 3 years. I'm also... say this on Maine for a second. I'm very thankful that I was going down this road as far as the diet and the sobriety before this was a problem. If we go back to January of 19, realizing this was an issue and working down the progress of my weight and then subsequently my sobriety, I am very thankful that started then and not dealing with what we're dealing with now as a 480-pound gentleman who drinks, who has other risk factors. So there's a lot to be said about living a healthier lifestyle versus a pandemic that is historical. You want to go 150 years? Maybe. 100 years? Maybe. But what we are doing right now is we're living in very interesting times, to say the least. Times where we must be very vigilant and must listen to many different things, including ourselves. When you're well in tune with your body is going to tell you a lot of things. Part of getting there is making sure your mental and physical health is paramount. So, that sort of relation between inflammation, fat cells, obesity, and COVID is spelled out in that article, as researchers are continuously finding. So then it becomes a question of protecting yourself. And some of this is just things you've heard over and over again, but I'll say it. Avoid large events and mass gatherings. Avoid close contact. And this is going to be very important now because of what we're dealing with, the latest strain of Omicron. Avoid anyone who is sick. These are things that we've talked about before, things that you've heard about before. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. If singing happy birthday twice to yourself help you with that timing, then so be it. Wearing a face mask in indoor public spaces, especially if you're in a situation with folks that may or may not be vaccinated. Again, Mayo Clinic, it's up on their site. And I think given what we've been seeing in the last month with the latest variant, this is stuff we have to take back into consideration. Then some more in that covering your mouth and nose with your elbow or tissue, avoiding touching your eyes, nose, and mouth, and staying home from work, school, and public areas if you're sick, unless you're going to get medical care. Avoid taking public transportation, taxis, and ride sharing if you're sick. These are what seems to be now common sense in late 2021 that we were just coming to grips with in early 2020. Some comments. Easy says, my wife has a bit of weight, cancer, diabetic on a needle, and she has about 5 years life expectancy. I had to calm down about her going out. She's not a moron. She's careful. It's about being careful. That's right, Easy. We have to be careful. And, certainly when we're dealing with all those risk factors, whether it's cancer or diabetes or obesity or whatnot, we have to be exactly that. Careful. We have to be careful. So, what's another thing? We could stay healthy from a medical, mental, and physical standpoint. And again, this is just things that seem like common sense, but we could talk about it for a second. This came from a site called obesityaction.org. Medically, monitor any pre-existing conditions you may have. Reach out to healthcare professionals if you're experiencing any symptom that may be related to COVID. If you're nervous about attending an appointment, ask your healthcare professional if you can meet over the phone or use telemedicine, which telemedicine has become very much a regular thing in the last year and a half, 2 years. So telemedicine is very much a real thing. I'll also say within mental health, telemedicine has become the norm and not the exception. From a mental perspective, maintain hope. Don't watch too much news. Make time to engage in conversations with family and friends. Things like enjoying a puzzle, picking up a hobby, basically getting your mind going, right? The best thing we could do for our mental health is keeping our mind fresh. That's how we grow. And then physically, exercise videos, walking outside, taking a lap around the yard, playing active games with your family, or learning something new. Again, maintaining health both physically and mentally. When we learn, we stay young. It's the best thing we could do. And then the next thing I want to say is something I said about a month and change ago. Get the vaccine. And I'm going to go to Maine for a second. The last time I had that slide up, we lost a dear member of the Venture Forward family. And I can't help but to repeat this, especially with boosters that are available out there, especially with everything that is going on right now with the latest variant of Omicron. We have to be on top of this. Now, you may have a stance where you're not getting the vaccine, and that's on you, and that's whatever it is. But I know personally, I am eligible for getting the booster in the first week of January because of my timing with Oservis, what I have to take twice a year for the multiple sclerosis. It's basically a disease-modifying treatment that targets my B cells and that of the CD20 marker. So the timing of me getting a booster that is supposed to give me antibodies has to be done within a certain time period, 12 weeks after a round of Oservis and 8 weeks before the next infusion. So the first week in January is the time I'm getting a booster for COVID. That's another thing I quickly will talk about, is anybody who's in a disease-modifying treatment for something like multiple sclerosis has to stay even more vigilant about when they can go and get a booster or the vaccine or whatnot. And that is staying in touch with multiple doctors, whether it's your PCP or your neurologist or what have you. It is the best thing we can do for ourselves. Easy says, I know a nurse that is close to me that has patients dying with COVID because they refuse respirators because they don't believe they have COVID. It's not the first time I've heard that. It's not the first time at all I've heard that. I'm taken back a bit because I'm just trying to process everything for a second and just having a moment of honesty with all of you. It is a very scary time we're living in. And whatever your thoughts are about the vaccine or boosters, that's fine. I know what I'm doing to try to stay healthy and trying to do the best thing I can to live the best life I can. When you have a comment like that, Easy spot on this, when you have people that are in the ER that are refusing respirators because they don't have COVID, they believe they don't have COVID, or a test would prove otherwise, what does that tell you? It's a time where things don't make sense at all. Everything's upside down. What is up is really down. What is really down is up. As Easy goes on to say, it's crazy, man. I agree wholeheartedly. It is crazy. And it's really scary too. Easy then says, 2 wards full and the ICU is full and 95% are non-vaccinated, she told him. 95%. If you have a chance to get the vaccination or the booster, please get it. Easy says 5 of his friends died of it. I got in a very interesting graphic that I gravitate to every single day, and I'll show you guys it before the end of this show. And just pure epidemiology, but that should tell you something. Michelle says that her mom was double vaxxed, and she is definitely dealing with a big breakthrough. As many people these days with Omicron and whatnot are dealing with breakthrough infections. Nevertheless, the numbers still say that if you've gotten a vaccination or a booster or whatnot, that you're basically minimalizing, or not minimalizing, but reducing the chances of a severe infection. And it's not going to be the rule. It's not going to be the exception that that's the case. The exception would be the very rare instances where there might be other risk factors that drive it over the edge. And we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. And I'm gonna put this graphic up real quick before I go there. Easy says, I pray and hope your dear mom comes home, Michelle. And Michelle, I definitely pray and hope that your mom comes home too. All right. So, as I mentioned before, in the United States, vaccines.gov 1-800-232-0233. It's a very much a great site to go to figure out where you can get a vaccination, where you can get a booster. That phone number is great for those that don't go to a website that want to learn more about what is available as far as getting a vaccination or whatnot. Where we are right now is we're at 51 million cases, 806,000 deaths, and 241.9 million people are fully vaccinated, which is about 61%. Again, it's very much a real thing where we have those levels of vaccination and we still have to be very careful. So using common sense when in public situations, wearing a mask, doing everything we can. Now, fortunately, you talk about going on planes and traveling. When in an airport, you have to wear a mask anyway. When you're on an airplane, all the airliners want you to wear a mask because that's law. So there's reasons why these features and these sort of regulations are in place. It's to protect. If we didn't have that, I don't know where we would be. It doesn't matter if your airplane has HEPA filters left, right, and sideways. There's still very much a thing we could do for the ounce of prevention that we could provide and have with a mask. So, and then furthermore, getting vaccinated. So, there's that. This is the one thing I wanted to show you. Is that from a caseload perspective, if you're unvaccinated, you have a 5 times as likely chance to get COVID than if you're fully vaccinated. It becomes a lot more stark when we talk about death, that the unvaccinated have a 13 times higher chance of dying than those that have been vaccinated. You can see the curves over time. These graphs are from the New York Times. They go back to early 2021. And you can see the little migration that goes up, and then you can see the little bump up now with Omicron, as you can see in mid-November to now. This is reality. This is what we have to deal with. And the best thing we can do is take care of ourselves. It means taking as much as we can as far as the advice and the regulations that are out there, but also just doing things that are healthy, both physically and mentally. Let's see. Some comments. Easy says that his wife is double vaxxed and 1 booster so far. Michelle says that her pharmacist said that too, and JV that she will get less ill. Yeah. The vaccination and getting those sort of antibodies help us. Whether you get those antibodies from an infection, but more importantly, whether or not you get those antibodies from those antibodies from the vaccine. And Michelle, thanks the VF family. Michelle, we love you. Easy says, I am aware of my surroundings and I rarely go out unless I have to. I'm not afraid of COVID because I do not want it to rule my life. My motto is don't be a moron, and that's to myself. LOL. You know what? You're spot on. We can't be afraid of this, but we can use common sense. So we live the best life we can. And we only get one life. So one day at a time, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, as we say in recovery, but it also pertains to our life. Easy then says that the dumbest decision government made was opening international flights a month ago in Australia. Yeah. We really rely on our governments to take a good look at what's going on from a public health perspective and making an educated decision. And if that educated decision is going to create an uproar, well, we have to be really cognizant on why that decision is being made, but we can't be too much averse to it. If something is way beyond, many people are going to say something about it. Many people are going to do something about it. But I think about what the CDC's done, and I'll tie it back to the Commonwealth for a second. Here in PA, our government's done a really good job in Harrisburg. This is very tricky. And at the state government level, it's very important. At the federal level, it's very important as well. And then what we do as a country basically transcends to the rest of the world because it's based on every other nation's government, every other country's government to do the right thing. So Matt gives a thumbs up. And Easy says, hey, Matt. You know, this topic is very much a different topic for this show. But it's a topic that we all have knowledge of, that we're all living, that we've been dealing with for the last 2 years. And you could tell that this topic has been really tough for me to get through. But I have to go back to what Easy said just moments ago, where he said, you have to live your life. You have to use common sense, but you have to live your life. And that was very much spot on. We have to live our lives. We do it in the most healthy way we can. So, that said, let's talk about what's coming up. Thursday, we're going to do a little schedule shift this week as we did last week. And Thursday night's going to be another VF Talks on the 23rd, the night before Christmas Eve. That's because Christmas Eve is basically a big holiday in my family, so that's going to be taking up most of my time. So Thursday night will be VF Talks. That will be at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, in the normal Venture Forward time slot, but we'll do VF Talks. And then next week, we're going to actually tackle the topic we were going to tackle right after the 10,000 steps. And that we're going to have a discussion about 12 steps 1 week from tonight. And the importance of not only what 12 steps means, but how important recovery actually is. We're going to go through that. As weird as this is going to sound, I suspect that conversation might be a bit easier than this one. Because it's something that we've been proudly fighting and proudly marching towards as far as making our lives better. So next Tuesday is going to be a really great conversation, and I'm looking forward to having it. And then as far as the rest of next week's schedule, we're going to run into a same sort of scheduling flip as far as New Year's Eve, but we'll talk about that when we get to next week. But some final comments. One more comment from Easy in the sense that he says, in capital letters, you can't live in fear. It will cause mental and emotional issues if you don't, my friends. Easy, you couldn't put it better. That was fantastic. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your contributions to tonight's show. Thank you, everybody who's joined, Matt and Michelle. Michelle, again, thoughts and prayers to you and your family. And thank you for joining me tonight on what is a very tough topic. But on that, I'm going to say the same thing I say at the end of every Venture Forward or VF Talks. Stay safe. Stay sane. Stay strong. Stay sober. You're worth it. Have a wonderful night. I'll see you Thursday night for VF Talks, special edition, at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. Have a great night. Fly be free.